Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started. Christy, are we good to go here?
Hmm.
Great. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So glad that you are spending this morning with us here on this Thursday morning. I wanted to provide a welcome. So welcome, everyone. My name is Vanessa Filbert, CEO of our local Community Action Partnership. And we're glad to host a conversation this morning to talk a little bit more about the current conditions that are here in Lancaster County, and put some hyper focus around some specific needs that our neighbors are having around access to food and food access. But I wanted to start with gratitude. Most days, many of us are running, dropping kids off, doing all kinds of things to get our day started before we head into the workplace. And it's been a common practice of mine to take a minute and slow down and say thank you, and to think about where we can place gratitude in our world. So I wanted to start by saying thank you to those of you who are on the call. Some of you are friends of CAP, know us, have been investors, partners with us. Some of you may be newer to the work that we do, but ultimately what we do here at Community Action Partnership is really key and essential to the people connected to this work. So whether it's our team, our board, or those of you who are partners or champions for our work, you make that work happen. So I wanted to start this morning with a thank you. I also wanted to provide a little run of show for our time together this morning, so that you kind of have a sense of what our agenda will look like, what we will cover, and how we'll honor your time this morning. So when we think about run of show this morning, we will start with a little overview of the community action world, how we started, what we do here locally, and how it impacts our neighbors. I'll give you a high level sense of kind of current conditions here in the Lancaster community, and then we will move to our panelist conversation. And I'll have our panelists introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the work that they do, and then we have specific questions that they're going to be able to address and respond to. We do have Q&A available, which is through the chat. Christy from our team will be monitoring that chat. And at the end, we'll take some time to kind of respond to some of those questions. The goal is that this piece that we're doing here today is something that will be shared. So you will get more information about ways that you can connect and partner with CAP, and an opportunity to maybe rewatch this if it was helpful and you wanted some more information. All right, is that fair? Great. All right, so good morning, everyone. Again, community action, let's talk CAP. So to give you a brief summary of what CAP is, if you were newer to the community action space, is that community action was contingent, built on the idea that local communities should really have a local grassroots organization paying really close attention to the needs of their neighbors. The way that we do that in the community action world is that we are required to do a community needs assessment, a data analysis of our local community. So when we think about what that looks like across the United States, there are 1,000 community actions across the US. There are 43 in Pennsylvania, and we are the Lancaster County Community Action Organization. This work was stood up under the Johnson administration in the 60s, and really was trailblazing work at that time to really think about the ways that we were more curious about the impact of low-income communities. We were trying to think more thoughtfully about who was impacted by low-income conditions. And the work of community action is to be in response of those conditions. So locally here at our local CAP, we are approaching our 60th year in Lancaster County as of 2026, and we have provided a myriad of services throughout that 60-year tenure. So when you think about our local work, we focus our work in 4 areas of impact: education and child development, health and nutrition, household stability, and safety and empowerment. So to provide some frame around what those impact areas focus on, we serve hundreds of students, children, in programs that are connected to our Head Start, early Head Start, pre-K counts, and early childhood experiences, home visitation services, and all the things that we can do to support child development, which includes also supporting families. And our health and nutrition team, everything that we do in that space is from kids and families, like through our WIC program, all the way up into our senior centers, which we have 2 here in Lancaster County that support low-income seniors, really with a space of socialization, connection to resources, and just joy in community. So there's a lot of good work that's happening there. And in the middle of that work in our health and nutrition team, which we'll spend more time talking about today, is really our focus on food access and food security efforts. So we'll dive a little deeper in that in our conversation this morning. Our household stability team, I think about that team as a continuum of economic mobility efforts. So everything from crisis intervention like utility assistance so that folks can get help paying those utility bills, all the way up until, resourcing families with the things that they need to create a stable financial portfolio for themselves and for their families, and to start dreaming about what they want for themselves in the future. So a lot of long-term case management and support that happens on that team. And then our safety and empowerment team, we're really focused on two key community issues. One is really focused around domestic violence and intimate partner violence through our DVS program. In that space, we host a lot of support for survivors and victims of domestic violence through everything like housing, emergency shelter, transitional housing, all the way up until legal services that we provide at no cost to families to help them navigate the legal system as they are looking for safety and starting their life anew. And then the other initiative is really focused on community well-being through our Crispus Attucks Community Center. Josh is part of our panel today, so you'll learn a little bit more about the center and what they do, but historically has been a part of the neighborhood here in the Southeast for almost 100 years, and has been a refuge for many in our community, but really focused on Black and Brown folks who needed safety and service during a time where that wasn't accessible. Now the center is just an anchor to the Southeast community, but really a safe space for neighbors, and we get to do a lot of this food security work in that space. So that's our overview of kind of CAP and what CAP does. If you have questions about that or have more specific curiosities about our work, you can throw those questions in the chat. Christy will figure out how we do all that. I'm going to talk a little bit about current conditions. So what do we know today? The news is moving fast, is what we know. So as of yesterday, we have a state budget signed by our governor, and we also have what we believe to be an open federal government, so there's progress there. I know many folks have been hyper responsive and very curious about the impacts on the state and federal budget conditions on the local nonprofit community, and it has been a difficult time. For an organization like CAP, we have about a $50 million budget that is hyper specific to each program and how they provide services to the community. But a large portfolio of the large part of our portfolio is really focused on contracts with the federal and state government. So when we think about having an impasse and a federal shutdown, the timing of that is not great for an organization like ours, because it really constrains our cash flow and really limits our ability to think creatively about the way that we service and support neighbors. So we have weathered the storm here since July. It isn't an automatic faucet back on. We are hopeful, grateful that things have been signed and things are back in motion, and we know it will take some time to kind of get things flowing again. But that's a real great step in the right direction. And while we celebrate that this morning, and we have had the opportunity to be advocating alongside business partners and community benefit organizations and our elected officials throughout these last few months, and that has been helpful to share the work that we do, it's also imperative that we don't forget that these conditions and the conditions that we are considering and that we are experiencing with neighbors were not just the impacts of a state shutdown, a state impasse, or a federal shutdown. We have been paying attention. Historically, that's our job, is to pay attention, but most recently paying a lot of attention to the increased need of our neighbors. So when we think about what's happening in Lancaster County, I wanted to provide just a few data points to level set kind of where we are with understanding. So a little bit of an education. So in Lancaster County, the official poverty rate is about 8.2%, and that's data that estimates between 2018 and 2022. This translates to about 44,000 residents in Lancaster County are considered to be living in poverty. Among that, children are disproportionately impacted. 9% of kids are living below the poverty threshold or guideline. And we also know that in Lancaster County, almost 36% of Lancaster County families are categorized as ALICE families. ALICE means, the definition of ALICE is asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So that are just what that means in layman's terms, that these are folks who are going to work every day and still do not have enough to meet their financial needs. So these are not folks who are not providing, contributing to our economic state. They do. They go to work every day, they pay taxes, they are purchasing, groceries and cars and all the things that it takes to maintain your life, and still do not quite have enough. We know that over 28% of families in Lancaster County are considered house cost burden, which means their home rent or mortgage is beyond their financial means. And we also know that we've been seeing locally, just continued increase in eviction filings that remains really significant in Lancaster County. During COVID, there was an opportunity where there were a lot of extra funding supports to provide eviction prevention efforts. Those supports are no longer. So when we think about gaps that we are experiencing, and while we are seeing great demand on the food space, we are also seeing great demand in the eviction prevention space. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about data. I'll let Zach and Julie be the experts on the food data, so I won't go into that. But I just wanted to say that from our frontline staff here at CAP, what we're seeing is household instability is kind of top priority for families. Right under that is food insecurity, and right under that are the utility costs. The other thing that has been unique, I think, in terms of themes and trends, is that transportation has bubbled up, has always been kind of a pain point in the Lancaster community. Part of that's our public transportation, part of that's access. But really lately, what it has been is folks just trying to maintain their car notes or their car insurance so that they can maintain their agency and independency to get to the places that they need to get to. And we're seeing a lot more folks looking for support to keep those costs covered. When we think about that, I know that there's some curiosity at times about, what those supports do, and they're so short term and it just feels like a Band-Aid. But our resource team, what they get to effectively do with families is they get to sit with them and understand what's going on collectively, holistically in their lives. They also work through a budgeting process to really assess how to help them prioritize the resources that they do have before they think about the community resources that we can offer. So there's a collective and thoughtful approach to how we do that. I would say, in my experience, I've been here in the Lancaster community 20 years. And moving from New York City to Lancaster was a big deal 20 years ago when we think about cost effectiveness. And I will tell you that as a family who has had similar struggles to the ones of those that we work with, our neighbors, participants, and clients, navigating the resource world is complicated, it's stressful, and it's not always as helpful as we think. So, the work that our resource liaisons do is critically important because we have an expert helping to navigate and coach people through that system. But it doesn't mean that it's an easy fix. So as we think about conversations like the ones that we're having today and investment opportunities to continue to support our work, it is necessary for us to think about unrestricted dollars that help us do that, because we are looking for unique and innovative ways to create economic mobility in partnership with families. Again, these are families who are working hard already every single day and really need an infusion of an innovation to help them build the momentum to think about, how they want their future to be for themselves and their families. So current conditions, again, I just wanted to reiterate, step in the right direction. State and federal governments are moving where we need them to. That means cash flow from contracts is there. We also have to pay attention to policy change and budget change through some of these, upcoming budget cycles. So while we are glad to have the federal budget, federal government kind of reopening, we also know that that continuous resolution that is proposed is only until January 31st. There is a likelihood that we could be right back in the place where there is another federal shutdown if we can't get agreement and alignment around policy and budget allocations. So the work is not done. There's lots of work for us to do. All right, I'm going to take a pause there, maybe get a sip of tea. We'll see. But while I do that, I do want to take a moment to introduce and segue into our panel. So today we're going to focus really thoughtfully and with a lot of care around our food security needs as a community. I'm going to call you out and I'm going to ask you each just to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what your role is in the work of food security, and then I will start with our questions. All right, Julie, can I start with you?
Yes, thanks, Vanessa. Good morning. I'm Julie Rhodes. I'm the Vice President of Health and Nutrition here at Community Action Partnership of Lancaster. And I have the privilege of overseeing our food work, our food access work. That includes, we are the county provider for WIC, as Vanessa mentioned, senior centers, food distribution, And we also have a growing food justice program that we'll talk a little bit about too as well. So pleasure to be here.
All right, I'm gonna head on over on my screen to Josh.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Joshua Hunter. I'm the director at Christmas Addicts Community Center. And I have the privilege of being in community with folks. I get to sit with our neighbors. I get to hear their needs, and I can and provide response in real time.
Great, good to see you. Good morning, Josh. Zach.
Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Zook. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank. We're the regional food bank that serves 27 counties in Central PA, but Lancaster County is our largest county, and also where I'm from. So it's something that I really enjoy investing in this work here in Lancaster County. At the food bank, I run the policy research. We did the community hunger mapping project in 2023 for Lancaster County, as well as the government relations and the impact and strategy teams. And one of the favorite parts of my job is to be working in coalition with folks all across our service territory, but especially in Lancaster.
Great, and we adopt Zach. He's we let him be part of the Central PA Food Bank team, but really he's a great partner with us and we get to borrow him very often. So thanks for being with us this morning. All right, Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Frankeny. I am Director of Food Justice at Community Action Partnership. And what we do here is basically we have a lot of rigid government programs. And my role is really, especially during this time, to have emergent response in a way focused on food access. And this role isn't made possible without Vanessa and the team surrounding me who have been, claim this role just to be mine, but I've never seen a more beautiful agency come to terms with the circumstance that we're in and jump in on my behalf to truly feed the community, but also provide like the true compassion and security along that line too.
All right, thanks. Good morning, Amanda. All right, so we're going to start off with some questions. We're going to get through. I'm going to pay attention to time. Christy is making sure that I honor time, folks. So I'm doing that with a lot of conscientiousness this morning. So first question, I'm going to start with Julie. Can you talk a little bit more about CAP's efforts around a county-wide food distribution and how CAP is supporting the current food crisis?
Great, yes. Thanks, Vanessa. So we have the privilege here at CAP to be the lead agency for food distribution in the county. And so what that means is that we have a network about 40 pantries that we support throughout the county, both in the city and in rural parts of the county. And those pantries range from small church operations in rural parts of our county to big food partners that are familiar to lots of folks here, Power Packs, Food Hub, those types of big partners as well. And so our role is really two things. So we get federal food commodities from the USDA TFAP program that Zach mentioned earlier, and Vanessa may have mentioned. But we get food from the federal government, and we take that in our warehouse and we redistribute that to our pantry network through the warehouse and also through delivery services. So we get that to pantries that aren't able to come to us and our warehouse. And then we also receive the state food money that we get. So we are in a great state that invests in food pantries. And we did see an increase in the new state budget for food pantries. And so we're excited about that. So we receive that money and we redistribute that to our food pantries. And largely we partner with the Central PA Food Bank in that as well, in terms of they're able to use those funds at the Central PA Food Bank to get discounted food. So that is really largely our role. We also do a lot of training and compliance for those pantry organizations. So we provide trainings and make sure that pantries are safe and that they are storing food appropriately and know how to do that work. So we provide a lot of assistance in that. So over the last few months of the state impasse and the federal shutdown, we've been working with our partners to really kind of try to front the cost and the burden of what's been happening with the state budget. And so largely, our food pantries haven't felt that kind of faucet turning off because we've sort of fronted that money. And then our partners at Central PA Food Bank have also fronted money without the state budget. So we've been sort of, trying to kind of continue to have that food flowing to our partner agencies and make sure that that wasn't turned off like it has been in other communities. So we're really grateful that that's been happening. But even so, we know that that's not, enough to meet the need. So while we are grateful for the outpouring of support from our state and through generous contributions that we're getting, we know that we're still struggling to do more and to meet the actual need on the ground. So we've been thinking about creative ways that we can source and think about our role, our warehouse infrastructure, delivery sources, and how can we continue to do that, play that role for the community and support our network. Because we really have been doing this work for decades in terms of food distribution. And we've been doing it, with these federal and state government contracts. But this really, I think over the last 2 years, we've been thinking about food justice and sort of innovative and creative ways that we can meet the need. We started a mobile market this year and we piloted that program. And so we're looking for other innovative solutions because we know that relying on the state and federal government programs is not the only solution. And we really want to change the food system here in Lancaster. So we're kind of on the edge of kind of that innovation.
Great. Thanks, Julie. And what I'll add to that is that one of the things that I think is most helpful, I think Zach, you mentioned this about the importance and the energy that we get in being a part of the Coalition of the Willing. And we do have a local coalition here in Lancaster County called Hunger Free Lancaster. Hunger Free is a coalition of like-minded partners who are all working towards the same goal, which is to have no one hungry in Lancaster County. And that's been work that we've been a part of for over a decade. CapNow, Central PA Food Bank had served as backbone and lead agency for many, many years. CapNow is in that role to help support the coalition and the work of the coalition. But it's important for us to know, and I know I have a question for Zach about this, but to talk a little bit more about the evolution of Hunger Free. So I'm going to pivot to Zach and then I'm going to come back to Josh. Is that fair? So Zach, maybe go a little deeper about Hunger Free Lancaster. And then maybe we can talk a little bit, Julie, about, how we think that coalition and the work of those providers helps us mobilize and meet the moment.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Hunger Free Lancaster County has been around for more than a decade. Hunger Free Lancaster County was a really important part of our Lancaster County hunger mapping research. And so we had, as you mentioned, Vanessa, more than 40 organizations across the county really participate in and be along as part of that process of trying to better understand food insecurity across Lancaster County, as well as the charitable food system response and as well like government program participation and things like economic and upstream issues. So our hunger mapping project, when we released it a couple years ago, really served as an impetus for imagining of what Hunger Free Lancaster County could be. So we called it, I believe, HFLC 3.0. And so we worked together to prioritize some of the biggest findings of the hunger mapping report and to really work to serve our neighbors facing food insecurity better across Lancaster County over the last couple of years. I think some of the biggest things that came out of the hunger mapping report that was important to the formation of Hunger Free's new iteration was just the role in Lancaster County of charitable food providers as often being the lowest barrier social service provider and wanting to lean into that role even further. And that could mean connecting people to other resources like SNAP and WIC and other things like that. We also found that SNAP participation was very low in Lancaster County, and there were lots of opportunities to improve. And then we found that pantries were really trusted community institutions, but there was still work to do in lowering access barriers further and building upon that trust. So Hunger Free Lancaster County formed a steering committee made up of really fantastic leaders all across Lancaster County in this food security space, really working together and not competing in the food security space, but really understanding that we can do more to serve neighbors when we work collaboratively. So we have 3 different action teams. The first being Neighbors in Need, that's really focused on that neighbor experience when you show up to a food pantry. we want your experience to be like a positive one, no matter where you are in the county. We don't want your location across the county to impact your ability to get the food that you need. We also have a Path to Prosperity action team that has really been focused on SNAP enrollment, SNAP participation. I'll say that one of the really awesome benefits of Hunger Free Lancaster County is the ability to learn from each other and to also just kind of iterate. So we've, with support of the High Foundation, have run a really fantastic SNAP Blitz project this last year. We created the first manual for SNAP enrollment for community benefit navigators that existed in the state of Pennsylvania. And so Pennsylvania DHS is really, really excited about this. And we tested and piloted a program to get volunteers to help enroll neighbors in SNAP throughout the month of October. So going forward with that, one of the things that we learned to iterate is that with the recent budget reconciliation, SNAP got a lot more complicated, and applying for benefits got a lot more complicated. So we think that while we still, of course, have a lot of work to do to help people understand how to navigate those new complications, the base that we've set by working together through the SNAP Blitz program puts us in a stronger position than we otherwise would have been, and then other counties across the state are in. And the last thing I'll note is we have Voices of Neighbors, which is a action team really focused on advocacy and communication of the issue of food insecurity across Lancaster County. Since we published the report, food insecurity in Lancaster County has increased, unfortunately, really significantly. So, and actually in 2021, that was the lowest rate of food insecurity in Lancaster County at 7.4%. That has since increased to 11.4% as of 2023. That's a 54% increase in just 2 years. And that means that now nearly 64,000 people across Lancaster County face food insecurity. And so that means that we, of course, have our work cut out for us, but it also means that the work that we do together is even more important than when the hunger mapping report was published a couple years ago.
Great. Thanks so much, Zach. I just want to do a little summary there. So Hunger Free, this coalition of the willing, really focused on food security efforts, kind of has a frame around itself, which is, to be collaborative, to be data informed, to be willing to share best practices, and to think about ways that we can invest dollars in a way that creates the most impact to the system. Sometimes that's through individual partners who are doing a specific thing. So we have, friends in the Solanco area. So Solanco Family Ministries really looked at ways that their community needed an adjustment in the way that they did things. So they changed maybe hours of operation and access points for neighbors in the Solanco area. And then there's a broader conversation around advocacy efforts that we're all a part of, where we're really trying to get aligned to shared messaging and really clear data and policy approach. So the coalition has a lot of, I think, good work ahead of itself, but is really successful because we are a lot of like-minded partners in that space who are not competing, Zach, to your point, but really looking for ways to collaborate and to think about Lancaster County being a thriving place that we all believe it should and could be, and in many ways is. So I'm going to transition to Josh to talk a little about Christmas Addicts Community Center. So we have some specific food efforts that happen there, Josh, with our pantry system and our lunches. And I also want maybe you to share with us a little bit about, what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the past few months that, we're paying maybe more attention to than we have in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. So every Tuesday and Thursday, we offer a community meal where folks can come in, they can sit, they can take it to go. And during that time is like how we actually get to learn about like community needs and like things that are happening. So during that time, we can transition them over to like, hey, we have this food pantry or choice pantry, which operates every second and fourth Wednesday of the month. And through a lot of that, we're learning that, folks are either they need to get their grocery bill or they need to pay a light bill. And through that process as well, we're also learning like what foods folks actually are eating and what they're enjoying. And we really try to like center ourselves around like nutritious foods as well, making sure folks have access to that. I think that's been one barrier. Folks are saying food is very expensive. And what we do know to be true is it's very expensive to eat healthy. So we're making sure that, folks have access to some of those pieces as well. But I think a big part of our job too is to build these relationships in community, because some folks, it could be a pride thing, but it's just a thing of like, how do we remove that barrier of making sure folks come to our doors and have the things that they need. I know folks are struggling right now. And if folks don't have a relationship with you, they won't come and visit you. So we're really intentional about making sure that our staff and our volunteers greet you, in a positive way. I know, Zach, you talked about this, how you guys, really show up to make sure that the space is comforting, and that folks have this access. I think one of the trends that we're seeing are we're just seeing more people. We're seeing more people in need. And I know with like the SNAP, all of those things. I think that there's this other piece of like the education around it. I don't think folks actually know, what is going to happen, or what the new requirements are. So I know we've lived in that space too of like providing this education around what are their next steps and what needs to be done. And I know, for me, it's about being this village, and everyone on this call is part of that village, and how we show up and how we really provide some of these resources to folks in our community.
Thanks, Josh. I'm going to do a little language definition moment here, because sometimes we're very used to some of the acronyms that we use. So I just want to level set in terms of understanding. So SNAP is our Supplemental Nutrition Education Program that is funded through the federal government, passes through to states, and then gets connected directly to families. Maybe it's, I don't know, Julie or Zach, can we give folks a really quick summary of the changes that we are preparing for as it relates to SNAP, and those who are eligible and maybe already engaged in that process? Rock, paper, scissors. Zach, you got first.
Yeah, it's a lot of changes, so Julie can jump in if I miss anything. I think so. One of the first changes is that work requirements were expanded to include folks with kids under the age of 18 for the first time. So now kids, like families who have kids between the ages of 15 and 17, have to show that they are either working or volunteering 20 hours a week. That might not sound like a big burden, but the paperwork itself, it adds on to the already just inordinate amount of complexity of applying for the SNAP program. And that paperwork as well, we expect that will cause folks to miss the required paperwork to retain their benefits, essentially, because it gets more complicated. And so most of the folks who were on SNAP are already working. So really it doesn't necessarily reduce, it doesn't necessarily incentivize work, but it does increase how much paperwork you have to submit. I'll also mention that it expanded the work requirements to people who are aged 55 to 64. They were previously exempt from the work requirements. I know for me personally, talking to a lot of folks in the community, there's going to be a lot of people who slip through the cracks. We have a lot of folks who say that they are disabled, but and they can't work, but they're not on disability. And so that means that whereas SNAP was previously the one safety net that they were able to access, now that becomes a lot more complicated for them. I think those are the two biggest ones. There's other like really like small changes, such as like exemptions for foster kids and veterans that are now not in effect anymore. They're going away. So it's going to be harder for those populations to access SNAP. And then lastly, there's some changes to the deductions for shelters and utility allowances that reduce the amount of benefits that people will receive. So Julie, I'm sure I've missed some stuff, but off the top of my head, those are the primary changes.
Yeah, that was great, Zach. And these changes that Zach was just talking about, the work requirements, are as a result of the Big Beautiful Bill that was signed into law in January. And so this is not due to the government shutdown. This was already due to happen. And so, we know that there's a lot of attention and a lot of press happening about the SNAP pause of benefits that happened in November. But I think what Zach keeps reminding me and others keep reminding me is that there is actually long-term impacts and risk to happening to SNAP with the Big Beautiful Bill that we haven't seen yet.
Yes.
Why we might weather this storm, from November, the cost sharing issues. So it's work requirements that are being put into place, which we need some education and rallying around in terms of how we're going to help folks meet that. But it's also the cost sharing. So states are going to be responsible for cost sharing the program of SNAP, which has never happened before, based on error rates for the SNAP program. And that will go into effect, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, to 2026 and 27?
Yeah, so the Pennsylvania is going to be responsible for an additional $125 million in administrative funds as of next year, October 2026. And then October 2027 is when we anticipate that some states might not have the money to fund SNAP because they've never had to pay a portion of the benefits. So Pennsylvania, for instance, will be responsible for 15% of SNAP benefits. That's $650 million, which is a inordinate amount of money for the state of Pennsylvania. The budget impasse that just ended yesterday for more than 4 months, the issues at hand were less in terms of dollars amount than $650 million. So we anticipate long term that we're going to have some really important advocacy work to do on maintaining SNAP in Pennsylvania and the US. Yeah. I don't know if you have anything else, Julie. Sorry for jumping in.
No, that was really helpful. I think we just know that the size and scope of the SNAP program, sort of dwarfs in terms of what the Charitable Food and Pantry Network can do. So for every one meal that we provide, SNAP provides 9. So we aren't, really well equipped to, the charitable food system is not equipped to meet the needs that will come from, the dismantling of the SNAP program. So we're already sort of in this food crisis and then anticipating sort of more changes and more concerns with SNAP. So I think hopefully, this momentum around the importance of SNAP that I think we've seen this month and this last 2 months can continue, and we can think about maybe, approaches to undo that or to, how we're going to meet that need going forward.
Great. All right, I'm gonna just in the spirit of time and managing our time well, I do want to give folks just a quick bit of information. I have one question for you, Julie, about Pennsylvania's investment that we've currently received, and then I think we're going to shift. We have a good amount of questions actually coming in, so I want to create a little bit more space and time for questions. So panelists, bear with me as we kind of navigate through some Q&A. So one, choice pantry was a term that Josh used. That is something that we have activated in our Christmas Attucks Community Center pantry experience. Choice is really about creating agency for families. So what happens is that in our pantry experience at Christmas Attucks, folks are get a scheduled time. They get to schedule an appointment based on their availability to come and do some actual shopping in the center. So the experience is set up very much like a grocer experience and by design, so that folks can actually take what they need and really consider what their family's needs are in that moment. What has been, I think, remarkably revolutionary about the way that experience feels is that it does what I have seen in my time, down at the center is that, one, we have volunteers who show up week to week who make that operation run. So if you are on this call and a volunteer, we extend so much gratitude to you because we can't do that work without volunteers. So Josh and Yaya and Amanda are a big part of that, the CAP team that helps, the management of that, but the volunteers are the heartbeat of how that place runs. So I just wanted to say thank you to volunteers who help us do that work. And two, what we've seen, I think, is so much care that our neighbors have for one another, that they are so conscientious in their shopping experience, that they are very thoughtful about what they're taking. They are very thoughtful about what other folks might need in the space, and they are creative. I remember being there and there was a gentleman there and I think it was like canned salmon. And he was sharing like 15 different recipes about what you could do with canned salmon. And I was like, I had no idea. So there's a lot of sharing and hope that exchanges in that space. But the purpose of Choice Pantry is to create agency and choice, and that folks feel like it's more of a shopping experience so they can choose what their family needs. And there's something really powerful about making that choice for yourself. So I just wanted to provide definition to what Choice Pantry was, because Josh had mentioned that. All right, in the spirit of time, $5 million invested in, from Governor Shapiro to Pennsylvania. Julie, can you give us a 30-second explanation of how and what that has done for Lancaster?
Yes. So yes, the Shapiro, prior to the budget passing, the state budget passing, Shapiro had made an announcement. The administration had made an announcement about a $5 million investment in the Charitable Food Network, which is exciting. And our state, like I said earlier, has always been sort of at the forefront of funding for charitable food networks and pantries, which is great. But as we said, $5 million is wonderful, and increases are great, and we welcome that response. But it really dwarfs in terms of the need that we're seeing, and we really, we have, Zach gave me the numbers a couple weeks ago, but $9.7 million in SNAP benefits that are coming into Lancaster. And so that money is also money that's funneled back into our local economy through grocery stores, farmers, and grocers. So, $5 million throughout the state, we get, then the pie gets smaller and smaller. So the amount that Lancaster will receive from that will be, significant, but not in terms of how we, when we're thinking about food sourcing for 40 pantries, how that will be. So, we are grateful that there's been lots of outpouring of support, but it's hard to understand that with the magnitude of what we're seeing in terms of need. And our pantries are reaching out and saying, we're seeing headlines of money coming in, and they're, don't always understand why, like, they're not getting more support. And it's because the need is growing across the board at our food pantries. And yeah, so the pie, when you take the pie and you kind of divide that out and everybody has an increase in need, it's really hard to make those decisions and to distribute that money in an equitable way. And still know that, our pantries are turning people away and they're running out of food. And how do we do that across the board and make sure that everyone's has an equitable piece of that? It's hard. So we're trying to think about other creative solutions, other ways that we can think about food sourcing and support to our pantry network.
Great. All right. Thanks, Julie. I'm going to take a pause here. We're going to transition to our Q&A, and we'll figure out how we get panelists engaged in the responses to those Q&A. We're at about 8:43, so we've got about, I'm going to say 15 minutes so that we have a moment or two to close. So Christy, how do you want to navigate us through Q&A?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of read the question, and then we can sort of decide who's best to answer it based on the question. So the first one that we'd like to hear a little more about is, with the growth in food insecurity and the federal and state programs notwithstanding, what more, this person asks, can we all do to make the broader community aware and truly understand the issue? So I don't know, Vanessa, if you want to speak to that, if with some of the community conversations that are happening currently.
Yeah, I think the first thing we can do is be curious about who is accessing or in need of those services. So I think the really most important thing is that we might need to wash our minds around who we think accesses those services, and really lean in with a lot of deliberate, intentional curiosity to say, who else is accessing these services? Because what we're seeing kind of on the front lines, it is working families for the most part who are trying to organize their day in a way that connects with a pantry service time so that they can do exactly what Josh was talking about, which is be able to mitigate and recalibrate their budgets to prioritize those cash needs. And if the food pantry can supplement them having to run to the supermarket, that extra $30, $40, $50 goes towards another basic need that needs to be met. So I would say we start with curiosity of understanding who's actually needing the system. We saw this in 2008. We're seeing it again now that, we have this idea of who our customers are, and then we realize that they are not exactly who we think they are. They are your neighbors, they're your colleagues, they are the people that you sit next to in your places of worship. They are people who maybe for the most part, maybe don't look like they are in need, but they are learning to navigate a system that they are unfamiliar with to meet the moment of what their family needs. So I would say we start with curiosity, and we learn more about who actually is in need of the service. When we do that, I think what we allow ourselves is the opportunity to think innovatively about how to get the service refined and the supports very low barrier to meet the moment for those families because we know who they are. So when we're curious, we can curate the appropriate access point to families. So I would say, that's one thing. I think the other thing is that, we have to do, and I know Zach, this is a big part of your work. The data helps us to, I think, maybe remove some of the unconscious bias that we think is around this issue of food insecurity and what it means. I remember Zach and I did a presentation a long time ago, it feels like, Zach. And, when we were defining to people what that looks like, it was simple things that families don't even recognize, like parents who feed themselves last and serve their children first to make sure that their kids have enough of a meal before they even serve themselves. So what we know is that often young parents or your parents are going without meals in prioritizing feeding their children first, right? So I think there's a space of like, how do we use the data and how do we use the storytelling to really help educate the ways that people are experiencing food insecurity? It's not just the people who go to the pantry. It's people who are making those kind of real-time decisions that impacts their well-being and their nutrition and their ability to care for themselves and their family. I don't know, Zach, if you wanted to add anything to like what we can do more.
Yeah, I think with the research and data piece, we really learn kind of what works, and we learn from each other. And so we've had a lot of pantries get really great ideas from other folks as well. And I think in terms of talking about this with the broader community, like you said, the myth busting of who's accessing charitable food is really critical. For instance, 90% of folks who visit pantries either are working full time, are on disability, or receiving Social Security. And so unemployment is such a very small driver of visits to the charitable food system. And that's really important for folks to know.
Great, thanks. All right, Christy.
All right, so next we have, and I think this was spoken to a little bit, but maybe just a little like capsule recap of the answer. So now that the government's reopening, will that help with the hunger problem? Do you think things will get back to normal? So I know, Julie, you spoke a little bit about that. I don't know if you want to kind of expand on that.
I think we're definitely excited and glad to learn that the government, both the state and the federal government is those levers are getting back turned on. I think we are still very concerned about the long-term crisis, and I think also concerned about attention spans and that we will forget. We will move on to whatever the next thing is, and there will continue to be a food insecurity crisis, and one that has been brewing before the government shutdown happened. Post-COVID, we've been in a food insecurity crisis, and that has been sort of growing, and there hasn't been as much attention. Now there's attention for this government shutdown and state, kind of impasse. But hoping that we can continue that momentum and kind of move forward. So while there will be reprieve, maybe temporary reprieve, we still need to think long term and think creatively about how we can, be better prepared to meet the moment. I'll let anyone else respond to that.
Yeah, I would just say that we're not sure what's going to happen because it's such an unprecedented situation. So in the first week in November, visits to charitable food providers are up 40% compared to last year's first week in November. And that's already on top of like really high visits. Utilities, for instance, LIHEAP program isn't going to be up and running immediately. And for folks who experience food insecurity, utilities are the #1 economic trade-off with food. And so we anticipate in the near term, there's still going to be some of those like after effects of people not having the resources that they need and coming to charitable food providers.
Great, thank you so much. Next question. This attendee says, thank you for your critical service. The services you discuss are generally reactive to a pressing need. Are there steps being taken to reduce the long-term occurrence of food insecurity? What can your agencies and the public do to that end?
Zach, I'm going to have you start, and I'm going to come on the back end of that, just because I
Yeah.
know you do a lot of advocacy work in this space.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's really a policy
Mhm.
issue. So when we think a big picture about how do we reduce food insecurity over time, that's about sustained and targeted investments in folks who need it the most across our country. So, for instance, the expanded child tax credit in 2021, that saw the biggest reduction in food, 1 year reduction in food insecurity that we've ever seen in the U.S. And unfortunately, we ended that after 1 year, but really advocating for programs like that are so critical. So I'll note that food insecurity has not dropped below 10% in the whole history of measuring food insecurity at the USDA. And that means like even in the best economic conditions, we really need those government like program investments to reduce food insecurity.
Yeah, and I'll just add to the back end of that, when we think about food insecurity, it's one piece of the economic pie that a family's navigating. So when we think what's the long-term solution, it really is about whole family approaches and how we create pathways to family sustaining wages that are connected to those career pathways that provide that option for families. So, while I think 100% agree with Zach, policy is essential and key to understanding how we change that in the future. But when we think about it from the economic engine perspective, we have to recalibrate the pathway to economic mobility with families. And we have to do that by thinking creatively about credentialing and career pathing that helps them break the generational poverty cycle that they're most often living in. So while I think food insecurity, utility, all those things are symptoms of a root issue, which is, living in conditions where you don't have enough. And we have to think about the ways that we disrupt those conditions. And what we know is true is that, credentialing and career pathing with families to really dream and hope for themselves is the way to change it at the family level. And then the policy piece helps us to support and sustain that. So it has to be a collaborative effort between the people and the policy. I think we have to capitalize the right thing, capitalize the people and maybe lowercase the policy piece, but they have to be in connection with one another.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. This person says, amazing panel. So again, lots of thanks to the folks on our panel today. Individuals in our county are becoming more aware, but have different financial resources. Is there a way to find specific ways to help personally? For example, even giving one food item per grocery shop, if that's all you can do. So kind of a question about, what are the different ways that folks can help with food insecurity, even if, it's not necessarily through monetary donations. So Julie, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, thank you, Christy. I think that's a great question. And I think we can realize that there's something that everyone can do. I think you can look at your, what you have to contribute. And we talked a lot about learning and being curious and looking at the data. So those are all good, sort of initial steps. And then I think, all of you are on this call are very active. So then it's thinking about what can you contribute, and thinking about what gifts you have to bring. Is it time? Is it a gift of time that we can use as a volunteer at our organizations? So like Vanessa was saying, we have a food pantry, and lots of food pantries across our network are run by volunteers. So is it volunteering your time? Are you part of, I know we were at a meeting, some of us were at a meeting with a church partner last week, and they convened a meeting. And it was just a lot of care that was brought to our staff. So is there different ways that you can support the people doing this work, and think about them and reach out to them? Because it's hard. It's hard for our staff. It's hard for volunteers to continue to show up when the need is so great. Obviously, we talked about advocacy. And then donations are also very helpful. And the range of donations, obviously, financial donations are the best way to give. So if you are able to do that, that is the best way because we are able to source and provide food at the level, we can purchase food at a better rate than people can purchase food at a grocery store. So if you, instead of that dollar going to buy a can of food, if you give that dollar to us, we can really maximize those funds in a different way. So yes, and then, of course, giving food. We provide food at a warehouse. So the scale of food that we provide to food pantries is large. So if you are looking to donate sort of, perishable food, connect with your local food pantry, and that would be probably the best way to give at that level, because we are looking at really the network-wide food. So while that is always welcome, and if you have food available, that is certainly, a great way, but sort of good, better, best. So the best, most ideal is funding and, being able to maximize dollars. Volunteering your time is a great way, and then giving food. But just think about instead of going to the grocery store to buy that food, is it best used somewhere else? And is it best for us to kind of purchase that food in a different way? So just think critically about how we are doing that. But lots of ways to be engaged in lots of different forms.
All right, thank you so much. What I'm going to just add a few bookends to our conversation here. I totally appreciate, Julie, your insight about how we can engage people, time, talent, treasure. I think we have to remember that and think about that for ourselves. I also will say, contact local pantries if there's a local pantry in your community and they might need that specific food item, feel free to do that. We're looking at it on scale because we support 40 pantries. So when we think about what's most helpful for our network, it's really looking at, Julie, to your point, of the ways that we can do that at scale so that we could invest as much resource into those pantries as possible. But again, volunteer efforts, advocacy efforts, food connections, and that unrestricted dollar is really important to the way that we can meet this moment. I want to just honor our time and say a few things. One, I wanted to highlight Amanda and the work that she's doing with our team here at CAP. Food Justice is a new initiative that we've kind of really, we've always been in the food space, but I think probably 2 years ago, we started to say, what else should we be doing to meet our mission, and to think critically about how we meet the moment with families. And we know that meeting our basic needs is one of those things. So this idea of having someone who's helping to steward all of the innovation and the new ways that we're thinking about this work is really special to us here at CAP. So I just wanted to honor Amanda and her team. Rolling Roots is one of those things, gleaning projects where there's so much learning that we're doing and inspiration that's coming out of that work and innovation that we will definitely need partners in that work. So I just wanted to honor you, Amanda and Esme, for the work that you're doing there. Yaya, all of you who are kind of in the food justice space. It helps us to know here at CAP that, there are things that we do based on our contracts and grant agreements that we have really, I think, mastered how we do service provision here at Community Action. But we also are pretty masterful at innovation. And I take a lot of pride on the fact that our team is willing to take risks and incubate and innovate new ideas. So I just wanted to hold space for that. And then I want to thank you all again for your time. We are in a moment that will not just be over when budgets pass or new policy changes. We are in the thick of an experience here. And I think it's our responsibility to stay acutely curious about the conditions and the experiences of our neighbors. And for some of us, that's not that far away. I'm thinking about my staff. I'm thinking about my mom. I'm thinking about lots of people who are impacted by the economic conditions of the world. I'm thinking about my own story. And it wasn't that long ago that I was working through those systems of applying and reapplying and recertifying to work full time and try to meet the needs of my family. So I just want to encourage us to stay really open and curious to the needs of our neighbors and to not put limits on how we can help. Don't think that your contribution isn't enough. Every piece of a question, a time allocation, a dollar matters to how we make Lancaster County a thriving place. So once again, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for your effort, your time, your curiosity. Thanks for caring about Lancaster. We sure do. See ya. Have a good morning.